Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam. On behalf of Book Soup, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for tonight's event with Zoraida Córdova in conversation with Adam Silvera, here to discuss the Inheritance of Orquídea Divina. Tonight's event will end with a Q&A, and to submit a question, please use the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen. If you see a question on the list you'd like for our speakers to answer, please click the like button, and we will try to answer as many questions as time will allow. And please also feel free to engage in the chat as you already are, because it's lovely when we're virtual to know that you are there and present and engaged. Makes it more fun, so thank you for joining us. And we'll be hosting more virtual events in the near future. And you can learn more about them on our website by signing up for our email newsletter. You can follow us on social media at BookSoup. And you can also follow our Crowdcast page right here to get direct notifications of future events. And past events are also available on our YouTube channel. Also, please support BookSoup and our authors tonight by purchasing a copy of tonight's featured book. You can do that by clicking the green button right below the viewer screen, and we have signed copies. So when you click on that green button, it'll redirect you to our website where you can complete the checkout process, and it shouldn't interrupt viewing because it'll open in a new window. So you can do that at any time and it won't interrupt. And I'll also share links to Adam's books. I mean, he has so many, so I'm going to share the BookSoup search. So you can just go to the BookSoup website and...
Zoraida has way more books than me.
I know you both... Yeah. This is true, which is amazing.
Event, so, yeah.
That's amazing for you both. No, we like to support both, but yes, of course, priority green button, and if you would like, I'll share the rest. And we're also selling digital audiobooks and ebooks through Libro.fm and Kobo, so if you'd like to do that, Libro.fm is an amazing audiobook company, and they support independent bookstores of your choosing. So we're also open for in-store browsing, so if you're local to Los Angeles, please come by 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., and we'd love to see you. And with that said, let me introduce our guest for this evening. Zoraida Córdova is the acclaimed author of more than a dozen novels and short stories, including the Brooklyn Brujas series and Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, A Crash of Fate. She is the co-editor of the best-selling anthology Vampires Never Get Old, as well as the co-host of the writing podcast Deadline City. She writes romance novels as Zoe Castile. Zoraida was born in Guayaquil, Ecuador, and calls New York City home. And we're so excited because this is her launch event for her new novel, so we're really happy to have her with us. Our in-conversation guest, Adam Silvera, is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of They Both Die at the End, More Happy Than Not, History Is All You Left Me, Infinity Sun, Infinity Reaper, and with Becky Albertalli, What If It's Us, and Here's to Us. He lives in Los Angeles and is tall for no reason. And we're so excited to have both of you with us at BookSoup. So thank you all for joining us and enjoy the presentation.
Yay, thank you. Thanks, BookSoup.
Yay, Adam, we're here together.
We're here, and we're going to be together in
2 hours.
To have dinner. But congratulations. How are you feeling today?
I feel very overwhelmed. Like, everyone's been so nice to me and left me all of these messages that I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna cry. I can't cry. I just got my eyelashes done. They're gonna fall out if I cry.
Well, I'm sure you have Danielle Clayton, our friend, keeping you grounded and not being nice to you.
Yeah.
If anyone gets too gushy, Danielle is probably like sitting on your parade. So
yeah. She's the meanest girl in Mean Town. So
I love it. So this book has been a journey for you. You call it your soul book.
I did call it my soul book.
Yes. Do you want to tell us what your soul book is about?
Yes. So the Inheritance of Orquídea Divina is... Oh man, how do I even pitch this book? I should have thought about this before. It's about a matriarch who calls her family back to their homestead to give them an inheritance. That inheritance is magical. And 7 years later, their family begins to get killed off and die off. And 3 of her descendants have to figure out why this is happening. And so they return to Ecuador in order to figure out their grandmother's secrets, but not all secrets are meant to be unraveled, and they discover some terrible stuff. So,
well,
yeah,
I am loving it. I'm reading it now, and it seriously has like some of the most like stunning writing I've written. Yeah, I wrote this book that I have read all year. I'm really like it from like the first page, you know, like it just feels so special. And yeah, so like I'm not surprised that this is like being recognized by you as your soul book. Like this already feels so much like, oh yeah, like this is a Zoraida book, like for sure. And you have range. I mean, from vampires to mermaids to strippers to witches. Like
that's true. That's true.
Yeah. So like, how did you land on the themes and the fantasy of this novel?
So this book actually started off as a short story in the anthology Toil and Trouble, which is actually out today in paperback.
Oh, fun.
Edited by Jessica Spotswood and Tess Sharp. And when they asked me to contribute to that anthology, it was about women in witchcraft. And so I had this recurring visualization of this woman who transformed into something else upon her death, right? And she was giving her kids an inheritance. And so I wrote the short story. And the short story is what I pitched to the editor later on for it to become a novel. And so I was tasked with sort of zooming out and figuring out, like, do the character names stay the same? Are they the same people? The location ended up changing in the novel. Okay. And so my work was, I'm going to turn this short story, which was just an image, into a full book. And as a, like, from a creative standpoint, that's actually a really, it's a hard task because you have to answer a lot of questions that you might not have asked yourself when you were drafting the short story.
I know, because with a short story, you're like, oh, you have more questions about this? Too bad. I'm hitting it and quitting it. Like, I'm gone. Like, this is it. It's done. You know? But when you're, like, blowing this out into, like, a gorgeous full novel, now you've got to, like, take stuff into account. So how did you go about doing that? Like, did you find it to, like, become, like, simpler as you went on, or was it kind of like a pain in the ass for a while?
It was a pain in the ass for a while. I sold the book in 2017, and my first draft, I don't know if my editor is here in the chat, but she knows that my draft was very slim. It was svelte. This bitch was on a diet. And so there were still a lot of world building things that I needed to answer. Like, is this Danielle? Stop it. Melody!
Yeah, your editor's here. Danielle's trolling.
Oh, no.
Or Danielle's dropping truth bombs, depending on whose perspective you're going to look at it. But yeah.
And I was still figuring out the questions that I needed to answer, right? Like, the problem with a book where there are the negative force is like generational silence. You have to figure out who's the actual villain. Right. And so I was approaching this book as a writer who was used to writing genre fiction, as opposed to writing a book about a few characters. And so as soon as I made that pivot, it all came together more.
Okay. Sorry, I was laughing at Danielle saying that your draft needed some beans and rice in there. Do you remember how slim that first draft was, like word count wise?
I think it was 35,000 words.
Wow. Yeah, that is that's an appetizer.
Don't shame me.
No, but see, isn't that? But I love that so much because we talk so often about what first drafts like need to be, and it's whatever you need it to be. Ultimately, whether you had written 100,000 words, 70,000 words, 35,000 words, you have a finished product today. And we need all these stories of, I mean, my first draft for They Both Die at the End was like maybe 40,000 words, and it got published at like 74 maybe.
Wow.
And I added so much, but like that was a journey for that book. And you know, this was your 17th novel to be published. I don't think it was your 17th to be written necessarily, but
No.
but you know, you had already had like a dozen novels under your belt, and yet you're still finding ways to change it up for yourself. So I applaud you, and I'm not shaming you.
Thank you.
How did you come to decide that it was going to be an adult novel, especially because Toil and Trouble is a YA anthology, right? So how did you make the shift to making it adult?
Well, you know, on one hand, I wrote Toil and Trouble as like a petty response to a YA novel about Latinx representation that wasn't actually Latinx representation at the time. And so I was like, let me write.
Adam Silvera.
Adam Silvera, yeah. And so I was like, let me write about a magical Latin family, like,
yeah,
down. And so the situational part of the story is the characters were a little bit, I think they were 17 in the short story. And so when I sold the book, I knew that I had to age. I aged them up only by 2 years, I think.
Okay.
Or 1 year, but the situation became adult themes, right? It's no longer the first experience of somebody like watching their grandmother die. Like, the story became about a woman's survival and what that survival looks like. And so it was always sold as an adult book.
Yeah.
Even though the conception, the seed of the story is young adult.
That's so interesting. I didn't realize that because I haven't had the opportunity to read Toil and Trouble yet. So, and I love witches. I don't know like why I like haven't hit that just yet. But I again like it. The story feels I'm maybe like 6 chapters in, and it's so layered. And I really am just like, oh my god, like I feel like it would have been such a headache to try to assemble this book. Like, did you write it? I mean, so obviously you had your draft that was like in need of like rice and beans, as Danielle said. But like, did you write it linearly, or were you writing kind of like just different scenes and then patching together later?
No, I have to write linearly, and that was the problem. I needed to figure out where everything was and what happened, right? So we opened the book. So the beginning completely changed, right? The book starts off with we get to see Orquídea arriving into the town of Four Rivers.
Four Rivers.
This is the postcard.
Postcard?
No, I'll bring you one today at dinner.
Oh, okay. I was like, or I have all the other goods.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
You have the cocktail recipe. Yeah, and that's the family tree. So we arrive at Four Rivers, and it was important for me to show this is where we are. And this is where this woman's story starts, but we're going to go back and then we're going to go forward. And I've never written a book like that because I always write a book that's like, okay, this is the opening, fast forward 10 years, or, you know, we have a fortnight to go through this quest.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, it's also, I have to say, like, you made me care about Four Rivers like really early on too, and which is such a challenge because I feel so often, I cannot tell you how many times I read like a fantasy novel or a speculative novel where I'm just like, I don't care about like all these details in this world. Like I just do not give a shit. Like why are you telling me all these things? And yet everything felt so intimate, and it really felt like a character, which is the thing that all writers talk about they want to achieve, right? But like most writers actually kind of fail at. Like you just, and myself included, I have some books where I'm just like, oh, the setting is like not alive there, and it's just very character driven. But like, so I'm saying like your story is so layered and it is absolutely like a full feast. So props to you. There's no question there. It really is just props for like making me care about like Four Rivers.
So when you write, do you not like? Do you think of setting last, or do you think of setting as a character?
So my thing is more that I think I'm always writing about New York, and it's probably like what novel am I on right now? I'm on the 7th. I think my 8th or 9th, whichever one comes next, like is going to be my first like LA novel, and I'm very excited to do that. And it's going to be from the perspective of someone who lived in New York and then came to LA. Like they're not going to be like born and raised in LA, but I think I've said so much about New York over the years that like I'm scared of repeating myself, and so I feel like the setting has taken a bit of a backseat. Like with the fantasy novels, like Infinity Sun, that was fun. That became a fresh opportunity to talk about like how magic intersects with that world. But if I'm telling another just like kind of like contemporary story, like What If It's Us, like I don't have something like super new to say about New York. I feel like my setting has become kind of sparse there. So yeah, but like you have such like I love the family, like the way that you introduce like all the progenies is like so fucking like well done. Excuse me. Did you at any point have like additional characters that you felt like you're like, okay, I got to be careful about like how many characters I bring into the fold of the story, or did everyone get like their page time as you decided?
There are so many characters. Actually, in another draft, like Ray had a boyfriend in Ecuador, but like I had to cut it out because there was just no time to do it.
Devastated.
I mean, there's always time to do it.
Yeah.
But I'm sure Ray would find time. But it was because they were in Ecuador for such a short period of time. It just felt really underdeveloped, and I didn't want to write like an underdeveloped romance at all.
Fair.
Yeah. So I gave him a different boyfriend.
Okay.
So, the Mr. Knight. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited. I texted Zoraida this morning, like, #gay for Ray. Just like, because I just loved his backstory so much. I was like, okay, I've already like fallen for this character. Anytime I get to like read a gay character like in a book, so hyped already. And yeah, I just thought like Ray was already such a presence. I find more and more often lately when I'm reading books and I'm falling for the characters, I'm like, okay, if I had to beg you for a spin-off, I feel like I'd want like a Ray novel. So far.
Well, that's good to hear. Like I don't know about you, but like when you're writing characters, because everyone's a main character here. Right? And so it almost feels like, yes, there are supporting characters, but making sure that everyone feels like a primary character is difficult. So for me, when I try to do everyone justice by answering a very specific problem. And the thing about Orquídea Divina is that the book itself, in order for me to really get to know all these people, I had to go back and write that introduction scene, right? Introduction to Orquídea's progeny. I had to go back because it was like, okay, who are they, right? Like before we just met them at the house, but I went back. It's sort of like you step a little further back so that you can see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And that's what, hi Juan. And that's what the chapter 2, the introduction to Orquídea's progeny, like that's what that was. It was like taking a step back because I knew that we needed to understand these characters a little bit more. And I was afraid to do that because I wasn't sure. I worried too much about the rules of genre fiction. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, well, this isn't genre fiction. So if like this guy can write 10 pages writing about his like tweed jacket with elbow patches, I can write about my characters, like, and the first instance in which we meet them, right? Sorry to anyone with a tweed jacket.
But also what's interesting is that because there are just so many, like, there's so much poetry in your sentences too, that I actually feel confident in your abilities to make a tweed jacket interesting. Like, I would love to hear the story of like a character of yours like wearing a tweed jacket and like how they came across with it, what it's done for them. Like, I trust you with that. And for me, I love hearing that this chapter 2 was originally there because like, and this is the fun stuff that we learn like as writers, like kind of talk about the craft behind the book and everything, behind the scenes stuff. Because I'm like, oh my God, that felt so seamless to me. I would have never thought that piece of the puzzle wasn't always there. And it was, you never overstayed with any of the characters. Like, I feel like I got enough time that I needed with all of them, just for the launch of their identities too. So yeah, props to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to just like keep reading more and more. Like I was like going to the gym earlier and I told Zoraida that like normally I like ride my bike to like meet my trainer, and I intentionally like walked for a bit longer so I could like listen to the audiobook until before I got my hardcover. And yeah, it's just I'm very like mesmerized and like fanboy-y over this book so far. Yeah, it's
Thank
just
you.
and I've read so many of your books too, and I just like I don't know, I'm a stan so far, and I don't ever use stan because I'm a grown-ass man.
You're a grown-ass man.
Yes.
You know, and it's strange because I think like I think you experience this too, probably. I mean, most writers is we change as we write.
Yeah.
And because this book took 3 years of putting together, and part of it was like doing copy edits during a pandemic, I kept changing. And so if I had written this book when it was supposed to be written, like within a year, I think it would be a very different book because I was a different person.
Yeah.
So it kept changing, and maybe it just means that I have attained personal growth.
But I mean, we hope to show growth in our writing all the time, right? Like, I never want to be, 10 books from now and my books are worse than they were, like 10 books before. And like I know you had mentioned too, and there's Danielle's now saying in the comments, because we're psychic, that like this book like took a lot out of you. And it feels like it just shows as well. Like, I mean, it feels really effortless to read, and I know that it couldn't have been completely effortless to write, and especially because, I mean, a soul book, right? Like, I mean, what does that even mean for you?
Yeah, because everyone says The Book of My Heart. The Book of My Heart was my debut novel, right?
Yeah.
Like, or maybe all of my books are the books of my heart, right? They're books that are a little piece of yourself. I always wanted a mermaid fantasy, right? And I always wanted a book about Latina witches, and but with The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina, it was a book that I didn't think I could write, but I did it anyway.
Yeah.
Right? Because like sometimes like you're not ready for a big concept. You're like, oh, I have this like really big idea, but I'm not Michelangelo yet. I'm still an illustrator for The Simpsons, right? So
I love that.
So
No, but that's true. I have a book like that where I've written the first page and I've read it to a couple people and they've gotten chills like from that page. I'm not ready to write the rest of that book. Like I think I need probably like another like 3 to 4 books like under my belt before I am ready to take that book on. And I think that book is actually will probably be an adult novel as well. And
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Like with your work, like even from your very first book, you have this like nuance of character where you're sort of like walking, like it's like walking down the street and it's a beautiful day.
Yeah.
And then you punch your character in the throat. And then and you're like, surprise, right? Like that, I think that once you make, and you have that in YA, and I think that like once you make that jump to adult, I can't wait to see what you're gonna do. I think it's gonna be fantastic.
Thank you, because it's really interesting because we have so many conversations in YA about responsibility and just like recognize like who we're writing for. And I think it's really tricky and it's like too nuanced to get into right now. But I don't agree with like every detail that has spat out the past like few years. But I think with adult, like there's just gonna be so much more freedom in that space where it's like no one's gonna be like, oh, you're endangering the teenager who like read this, and it's like, No, well, I didn't write it for the teenager. I wrote it with like grown ass people in mind. So if someone else like finds their way to it, like good for them. Like I welcome it. I would never warn anyone off from reading anything.
Yeah, or I wrote it for the teenage version of myself. Like yeah. Some of us have dangerous lives, Susan.
I have to, and you know, it's really frustrating, especially like as a queer writer, where I'm like, I didn't get to read a lot of fiction that especially like reflected my identity as a teenager. So now, and I also didn't get to be out as a teenager who was like living in the South Bronx, right? So the YA books have been a wonderful opportunity for me to reimagine my life in those spaces and at that age and see how things could have unfolded had people been, you know, just a little less shittier. You know, but I also think that I'm now 31 and I have other things in my life that I want to be talking about that are hitting more of the like adult range and just things I've been through in the second half of my 20s that I mentioned and explored on the page. But I'm not ready. I can't pull off my equivalent to this yet. Like and I know that, and that's okay to know. Like I think I hope to keep getting stronger with the other works that I'm working on, but like I applaud you for doing the damn thing.
I don't know how I pulled off this book, to be honest. I'm surprised at the reception, truly. I feel like a kick dog in this industry, so I'm just like, really? You like me?
But of course, and I mean, for me, I like, just as someone who literally worked your launch party for your very first book.
Yes.
Wait, what year was that? That was 2012?
2012. That was May 2012.
Yeah, I was working as a bookseller at Books of Wonder. I was working Zoraida's launch for The Vicious Deep, and that was the first time I got to meet Zoraida. And Zoraida was a total doll to all the booksellers, myself included. And not every author can say that. You know, like I definitely have authors who were like shitty to me when I was a bookseller, and I'm like, now we're colleagues. And it's nice where I'm like, yeah, Zoraida was never gross or arrogant, and now we get to be friends as a result. And you were friends with so many of us before we even like published books. Like you were never one of those gross like fame chasers either.
No,
which there are many in YA, and we group chat about them all the time. But yeah, it really I've always had so much like respect and adoration for you. I want to talk about this gorgeous cover because
let's talk about it.
Like Infinity Sun was kind of a soul book for me in a lot of ways too, and I remember like getting that cover after working on that book for, you know, on and off over the course of like 10 years or whatever. Like I like cried. It was the first time I ever cried getting a cover. I didn't cry with my first book covers, like, but that one like was so meaningful for me. So I'm like, what was your reaction when you got your cover for your soul book?
I cried when I got my cover.
There we go.
I truly did. I'm pretty sure I was with Danielle, but I don't remember where we were. I know that I interrupted her and I was like, oh my God, look. So we got, it actually changed a little bit. Like if you Google it, you could probably find the original cover. Orquídea had tattoos on her body.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's essentially, and we darkened this part here, so it looks like the night is her dress, which I really love this detail.
Right.
But I literally like just burst into tears because I've had a decent enough relationship with my publishers, but this was the first time that I felt listened to as a writer when it came to the cover. Because you know, when YA, they give you a cover and they're like, we really love this direction.
Yeah.
I hope you love it too. And you're like, actually, I don't love it. Is the opposite of exactly what I wanted. But you're stuck with it. And there's, and even if it says in your contract, like you have cover consultation, it just means like they show it to you.
They checked in with you and
yeah.
You get feedback and you countered it. Bye. Consulted.
Right. And but with this cover, I was like, I said I want Orquídea and I want I want her to have her an orchid at her throat. Danielle, hilarious.
Yes.
And so there was another direction. I think I can tell you guys this because it's launch day. Originally we were gonna do her hair as being the roots of a tree, like a kapok tree, a ceiba tree.
Yeah.
But we were worried that it would look too high fantasy.
Right.
You know, and so I think this direction is a little bit more mysterious, and it still captures like the magical part of the book.
No, it definitely reads fantastical, the cover, and it's just so shiny.
So the artist his name is Eric Davila. You will probably recognize his work, and he also did Elizabeth Acevedo's cover, and he's done a lot. He did Nina Moreno's recent cover, and so it's a very specific style, but I think she's beautiful. I almost got one of those hummingbirds tattooed on my body, but I got a different one instead. I can't see it.
Cute. Oh, cute. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, I love it. Like, I mean, I think you had sent it to me maybe a little before it was revealed as well. I think I saw the original one as well. I mean, it's just been winning the entire time. But so, do you see yourself moving into more adult novels? Like, is that the space that you think you want to be in right now?
Yes. For the foreseeable future, I hope to be writing adult.
Yay, okay.
I can't say anything, like, because I'm currently not under contract, technically.
Wow, okay.
And so I'm working on something that I'm gonna self-publish. But I'm going to stick to adult for a little while. I think that's where my heart is calling me.
Yeah. No, again, like, there's just the writing here. I don't know. It feels like it's hitting differently for you, where, like, I think you understand that there are more readers who are going to appreciate, like, the beautiful prose that you've just had in you all along. Whereas, like, YA sometimes demands for us to just be fast-paced and guts cut to it, and like no one needs the beautiful sentence. And I'm like, I want the beautiful sentence. Like, let me.
Do you know how I think that somebody was like, "Oh my God, you really flexed in this book," and I'm like, "Bro, I flex in every book.
You do.
You just need to pay attention, okay?"
Yeah. No, and it's funny because it's like I'm aware of that as well. I just feel like this is. Like, you're like destined to be in this space. Like, it really, it feels so, like, I don't know, like a classic already. And but truly, like, I am just, I'm loving it.
So one of the things, like, what is drawing you to adult eventually, right? Like, you say you have this other novel. For me, it wasn't an accident, because I've written adult steamy romances under the name Zoe Castile. And so with adult romance, obviously there's a higher heat level. It's, relationships. With Orquídea Divina, somebody asked me, like, oh, could this book have been YA?
Right.
And I think the answer is no. And it's not that YA needs to be all happy and only good things happen to characters. I think that there's like a push for that, for like this sort of stripped down version of reality where like everyone is nice. And I'm like, but the reality is, like, everyone is horrible, and we meet some good people along the way. So no, Orquídea could not have been a YA novel.
Yeah.
Maybe the start of it, the short story, like a very specific section, was a YA short story, but the rest of it, no. And so I feel like for you, what Could you translate any of your YAs into adult in the same way?
Yeah. Well, I will say quickly also, I feel like Orquídea, like there could have been some fun, especially as you tell some of her backstory. I'm like, there's probably the YA novel there. And I think as we're like, I mean, I'm still obviously early in, so I don't know how deep you're going to get to certain things, but I'm like, I can see where a YA novel could have been fashioned from those moments in time that are like leading to the big stuff I think is going to like go down in Act 3, and you know, the engine behind everyone else's journey. But yeah, I think like maybe like this full package, like, you know, if you were going to design it as a YA novel, probably like maybe wouldn't have felt so Orquídea heavy. But yeah, I don't know. For me though, like I think I could have done History's All You Left Me is a novel that everyone's always like, oh, can you do like a sequel? And I'm like, absolutely not. I have no interest in that. But I started thinking about it recently. I'm like, if I had to do that story or explore those characters again, I would want to do it as an adult novel, just because, you know, that's a story of grief, and I never want to pretend that grief is something that you reach the end of the YA novel and it's done.
Over.
Yeah, like no, I want to show the ripple effects from that, you know, and I just like I have so many conversations with my therapist about trauma, and you know, I grew up like watching my dad being like really domestically abusive against my mom and everything, and like that has major ramifications on my life today. I'm 31 years old, and that was shit that went down like over 20 years ago, and yet like that is still there in me, you know, and I see the way it still affects my mother. And like I took her to go see Waitress, which by the way, like if you're gonna see Waitress, just so you know, there's like a domestic violence like subplot that's in that story. It's not just about like white women baking pies, like I thought. Like I thought I was bringing my mom to like this cute ass play, and then like you see this man raise his hand at her. My mom just like jumps like in the chair and holds on to me, and I'm just like, my mom like that, you know, she experienced that like over 15 years ago, probably the last time it happened, right? And she's in a loving new relationship and has been for like almost 8 years now, and yet with a man who she's totally safe with, but the trauma's there, you know. And I think that is what is kind of magnetizing me for an adult novel, just kind of showing a thing. Like I'm actually doing something kind of fun in a YA novel right now that I'm working on, where we're gonna get to like meet a couple kids as sort of like a subplot, and then I'm going to tell a different YA book where they're going to become the primary protagonists. And you don't have to have read that first book to like understand this one. It's not going to be like a sequel or anything, but you're going to get to. That's going to be sort of like an opportunity for me to explore trauma,
right?
And just showing like, okay, cool, yeah. If you want like the full detail, go read that book. But like, if you just want to see how these kids are existing with this in their past, this book will do that full package for you. But I'm excited to move into adult at some point. I love YA. It's been great, but like I think I will probably run out of stories that I genuinely want to tell. I think I can keep making up ideas, but like that is who's that for? Like it just I want to like do the thing that's like going to like serve me and not just like force my way through fiction. Like this job is hard enough. As we're discussing, like you're constantly reinventing your methods and your craft. The last thing you need to be doing is writing a book that you don't want to write. So yeah. There were a couple questions. There was one by Danielle who didn't troll you. I will preface. How much of your own family lore did you use as inspiration for this book? How did it feel to tap into your heritage and family journey to build this? Was it hard? I think Danielle knows the answer if it was hard or not, but I appreciate her, slipping that in there.
Thanks for getting it going, Danielle Clayton. Yeah. Danielle J. Clayton. So, you know, this book was hard for a number of reasons. I was afraid to put too much of myself in it because I'm afraid that like if somebody doesn't like me, it is. If somebody doesn't like the book, they don't like me because it's my story. But that's fine. You know, so I did put a lot of family things in it, probably more than I should have. You know, like the non-existent relationship that Orquídea has with her dad, who's just a man.
Yeah.
a sailor who like stopped by Ecuador and like didn't want this kid, right? That's based on my grandfather. My grandfather was not a sailor, but he also didn't recognize my mom. And
Wow.
I know that was really painful for her as a kid because all she wanted to do was like spend time with her dad. And instead he would just like shove money into her hand and tell her to go away. Right. And so my mom is a very forgiving person, whereas I will write a character based upon you and let the whole world know that you're a piece of garbage. And then tell all of my live streams. And this book's going to be in Spanish. So like, hopefully his other kids will read it and be like, oh. My dad will probably.
Sorry, go on.
No, like my dad will probably also read this, and my dad is a civil engineer, and the Orquídea stepfather is a civil engineer, and I'm very judgmental of civil engineers in Ecuador in this book, or the narrator is. And so when he reads this in Spanish, because it'll probably be the first book that he reads of mine, we have like a shaky relationship where I'm the only one of his kids that tells him the truth. And he's probably gonna cry. Like, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. But yeah, so there's a river monster in this book. And the place where Orquídea comes from is called La Atarasana. And that is where I'm from in Ecuador. That's my neighborhood. My whole family lived there. My whole mom's family. And one of my uncles, he had a big belly and he had a big scar across his belly.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was a little kid, I asked him, how did you get that scar? And he told me that he got it wrestling with the alligator monster in the river. And so that's why that story has always sort of lived in my head.
Yeah.
And when I started writing this book, it just was like, oh, there's a monster in this river, obviously.
Yeah.
And Orquídea is the only one who can talk to it, right? Because one of our family legends is that my great-great-grandfather was a Spanish fisherman, and he was the only one who could catch fish on the river. And the reason why is because he had a pact with the river spirit. And so he would fish, and then he would pull in his catch, and then he would give back half of his catch back to the river spirits. And I gave that story to Orquídea.
Yeah. Who, by the way, is like, I hope if I don't get closure on the snake in the drawer, by the way, I'm gonna like text you and be like, okay, I need more.
Yeah.
Because I'm really so attached to the story. So did you model Orquídea like after any particular person in your family, or was she just kind of like an amalgamation of just like intrigue and the different women in your life?
I think she's an amalgamation of, my grandmother, my mom, like just different women in my family who are survivors. They survive poverty and abusive men, and leaving the only country you've ever known in your 30s and 40s and going somewhere where you don't know the language and working in sugar refineries in the middle of nowhere, Queens, and things like that. And so I just made their experiences a little bit more mythical, but the root of it is from just like the women that are in my family. We have a joke in our family where I'm just like, all the women have to be strong and all the men just have to sit there and get fed.
Oh, unfortunate. So this question's from Sharon. Which character was your favorite to write and why? Especially in this cast, I'm curious.
My favorite character to write was Raymundo. Ray. Ray is somebody who has a lot of passion. He's a painter. but he doesn't. He after his mom died, he just like pushed back all of his passion because he just went into survival mode. And so after he receives his inheritance from Orquídea Divina, her only request to him is paint me another painting, right? And so we see sort of his descent into like the madness of creation. Also, Ray is the kind of character that I wish I could be in telling people the truth right away, instead of holding back.
Okay, I love that. I mean, I feel like I have taken on that task or like that challenge as well lately, because I used to want to just be like the kind person and just like, okay, I don't want to like stir any shit. I'm just like, no, like it doesn't do me any good to bottle things up. So yeah, anyway, I'm gay for Ray. Next question. I just love this. What are you loving right now? Just like in life.
What are you loving?
It could be media, it could be LA, it could be travels, whatever you want.
I'm loving Adam Silvera. I think that, what am I loving? Oh my God, that shouldn't be such a difficult question. I was loving living in Puerto Rico for 7 months. I was living there for up until September 1st. I've been there for this year, and it just was an incredible, like, I love that island and I love the people so much. I think it's a beautiful place, and I wish the United States was better to it.
Yep.
But that's a different story. Danielle. I love Danielle Clayton, obviously. I actually love reading I'm loving reading the works in progress that my friends have right now. Danielle is going to have, like, I read her middle grade novel, The Marvelers, which is going to come out next year. Yeah. It's so smart, so magical, so beautiful. And so I'm really loving, like, I'm loving, like, not being on deadline.
Yeah, I mean, honestly,
and taking my time.
When you said that you didn't have an active deadline right now, I was like, oh my God, I feel like that's the first time I've ever heard you say that. Like,
yeah,
I've known you since 2012. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I keep threatening Danielle with, I'm going to pack all my bags and assume a new identity in Malta.
Well, don't tell her where. Like, just,
you're right. I got to change the place.
Or like,
I got to change my place.
Yeah. Okay, we kind of answered this. Yeah. This is from Nicholas. Do you expect that your future adult novels will also be magical realism, fantasy, speculative?
No.
Oh no, really?
Speculative, yes.
Yeah.
But like with like clear rules of speculative fiction.
Okay, yeah.
I kind of want to like come for Neil Gaiman's throne. He can write anything, right? Like he can write urban fantasy and historical fantasy and like all this stuff. And so I think that no matter what I write, it's going to have magic, family, and romance.
Cool. This might be interesting to you. I'm actually like not a Neil Gaiman fan. Like I've tried reading like 3 of his books, like across different age categories as well, and they just don't do it for me. So keep in mind as you're saying like, oh, like my God, I'm mad at Neil Gaiman. I'm like, no, like Neil Gaiman like can't write this. So I'm just like,
You're right. You're right. I could write Stardust, but he could not write Orquídea Divina. Let's just be clear about that.
By the way, Stardust is literally an example of one of the books that I tried to read. And it was just like, because my friend was like passionate about it. And I was just like, all right, let me try it. And then I like bought it from Barnes & Noble. And I tried it again a few years later. I'm just like, okay, you know what? It's fine. And I also like normally wouldn't say this about authors, but it's like Neil Gaiman who's like, you know, if someone tags
mega famous.
Don't care. Yeah, like he's not gonna like his sales aren't about to drop because like I said that I'm not a fan of his books. But yeah, I just I don't know. I hope that's a little ego boost.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, from Tanya asked, what are your best writing tips for newbies?
You have to answer this question as well. My best writing tip for newbies is to read widely and to read out of your comfort zone, because you'll never know what unlocks something in you in a way and give you inspiration for a story, right? I read a book about plants, and some plants make a very important make a very important cameo in the Inheritance of Orquídea Divina, right? And so I think that like it just struck me. I was like, oh, this makes sense. Like these plants are native to Ecuador. Like, yeah, of course I should put this into the book. And so I like reading nonfiction. I know some nonfiction is really hard, but I think that reading is the most important thing a writer can do, because it keeps your mind fresh, right?
Yeah. And I think also just like finding stories, even outside of books. Like, I mean, I watch more TV than I read books, and that's actually always been the case for me. I'm a very slow reader, and I'm just more, I'm more likely to receive something like auditory. But like I learn a lot about storytelling from playing video games or from listening to a nonfiction podcast or reading the newspaper or reading like some like random ass stories. But my piece of advice though is definitely just like not thinking about rules while writing. Like perfect example is like, going back to like your first draft being like 35,000 words. It's like, who gives a shit today, right? Because like ultimately a full-length novel was produced. Like that was just your process for that. And what your process is in creating the book does not matter to anyone else. Like they are not going to, like this book doesn't come with like an additional sheet of like, well, here's how like Zoraida like wrote the book and everything. Like take that into account like while you wrote it. Like it doesn't matter, like we're only absorbing the story that you've given us. And I have like done books like out of order. Some I've outlined. Some I outline maybe 2 chapters at a time while still writing the book. Others, they both I think I outlined the entire book from start to finish before I wrote a single page. History's What You Left Me is like a non-linear novel, and I wrote all of the today section, then I wrote all the history section, and then I pieced it together. It just like it. These are all different ways to write a book, and yet books got produced. So just like figure out what your process is. If anything that we've talked about today doesn't work for you, that never speaks to your failure as a writer. It just speaks to the failures of that process. And
absolutely,
that process might fly for you for a different book, might not, doesn't matter. But just like find your way in, write your book backwards, write it in a silly font, record it while you're on your phone. Like, who gives a shit?
Yeah, smart.
Yeah. Sharon wants to know what were you reading when you wrote this book? Like, was there anything that besides like the nonfiction book with the plant stuff? Like, was there anything else that felt kind of influential to you?
Not really. So one thing is like when I write fantasy, I'll read contemporary. When I write contemporary, I'll read fantasy. Because Danielle said not Comic Sans. LOL. And I think that that's because I never want to like unintentionally absorb something from another writer's work.
Right.
But I'll also watch TV. I watched a lot of movies and televisions, like just binge watch all 15 seasons of Supernatural.
Oh yeah, we will talk at dinner. Go on.
Oh my God, yes. Yeah. Oh, okay. So yeah, it's just I think that I can't tell you what I consumed. I just know that I read a lot of romance. You could probably go on like my Goodreads page and look at like all the books that I've ever read, because I do keep track of them.
Yeah, I stopped. I felt like there was too much pressure of like people judging what I was reading, and I just wanted to. Like...
Oh, I don't put like the super dirty books that I read on there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not reading like super dirty books because I'm boring, but like I I just more like, I'm like, I don't want people seeing that I'm like reading the like popular bestseller that everyone else is reading. It's like, get an original thought, Adam. Like you're not cool for reading the book that everyone else is reading right now. So I stopped posting. All right, I want to sneak in a couple more these last two questions.
Okay.
From Juan, when it came to world building in this novel, what was your process in crafting the detail? Like, how did you decide like what you wanted to bring to life?
This is actually this is my editor's, like, this is where my editor gets the credit, because she really pushed me to answer those actual questions. Because for me, I would have been like, oh, it's the magic just exists, like I don't have to answer it. It's magical realism.
Yeah.
But with Orquídea, right, like, so there's nature magic. Sometimes like you lose control over nature magic when you're having an intimate moment and like stuff happens with like these flowers, or
can't wait.
Or there's this like circus with supposedly magical beings there. Are they actual magical beings? Like, do I have to answer that question? And so it really came from my editor pushing me to answer those things.
Love it. Well, and then the second question is actually kind of a nice compliment to that one. What was it like writing about Ecuador? Did it feel special writing about your birth country? And I always like, I love that too. It sort of feels like when we were talking about New York, where I'm like, okay, yeah, like I know New York, we get it. But like for you, what was it, kind of like combining the magical elements like into Ecuador and just like bringing all that to life?
It was a lot of pressure because, there are a lot of writers who write about Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic and Mexico or certain parts of these countries.
Right.
But I could probably fit in one hand the number of books that reference parts of Ecuador, right? And so for that reason, I felt like the burden of introducing this country with a very complicated history, a very long history, and it's sort of like being the only Ecuadorian you've ever met, so I have to be on my very best behavior so you think that Ecuadorians are nice and pretty. And so that pressure was not fun, but I'm also writing from a place of diaspora. My characters, Marimar and Ray and their cousins, like they go back to Ecuador, but they're like third generation. So they're 2 generations removed from this country. So I'm directly related to Ecuador. So I'm not I'm not writing from the same kind of ignorance, but I'm writing so I know more about Ecuador than my characters do, but for them the experience is like I'm coming to this place where my ancestry is from, and yet I don't know the language, I don't know the history, and I'm here to learn. And so it was a hard balance.
I mean, it's so stupid, right? Because like so many like just dumbass people think that like, oh, you're Puerto Rican, so you were like programmed with like Spanish and all the knowledge of Puerto Rico like in you. I'm like, that's not how
and dancing
works. Yeah, like but yeah, no, but I appreciate that like you didn't that you stayed authentic to what those characters' perspectives were, and not just like giving them the like, oh yeah, we like, I don't know, we read a little like travel guidebook on the way to Ecuador. Now we know everything. It's like no, like that's not their perspective. That's not the life they lived, and especially that's true for like the character who she marries. She's expecting the kid.
Tatinelly.
Yeah, and she's just like, oh my god, that line about like their family like just uses salt. I'm like, no other seasonings or whatever. Yeah, like I mean, she obviously has her own emotional journey with her background and everything. Like, but she's like, anyway, I'm so excited to read the rest of it. But congratulations on the book. I am so hyped for you, and I'm excited to see you at dinner in a little bit. But yeah, thank you for letting me be part of Inheritance Night.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Make sure you please buy a book from Book Soup. I went to the bookstore to sign them. Also, if you go to if you go to the pre-order page for Orquídea Divina, you could get free stuff like a sticker sheet and this postcard and a bookmark. So go
and the
collect
book comes with a map, family tree.
Yeah. So go collect your free stuff if you have a U.S. address.
And that's on your website?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure we have it right. Okay. Yeah, you can't get that stuff with Book Soup. That's okay. But you should get that fun stuff because that's awesome.
Yeah, you
if you have extra,
and then fill out the form.
Yes.
If you have extras and want to send to us too, we're more than happy to include it with our stuff. That'd be super fun. Okay, I can email about that. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And again, congrats. And, I was going to tell you to buy the book too, but we just did that. So thank you all for joining us tonight and have a wonderful rest of your evening. And you two have fun at dinner.
Thank you. There's the link, everybody. Bye.
Bye.